we are very happy to have with us Mr. Raghunandan Rajmani, who is the Executive Director of the Indian Steps and Business Incubators Association of India. Welcome, Mr. Rajamani, to the Indian School of Business and to the Bharti Institute of Public Policy. I think what you are doing as part of the Association of Incubators is extremely important, because we know that a lot of incubators are coming up, and there needs to be a network of the incubators. So how do you see the idea of individual incubators and a network of incubators, especially in the context of a lot of states currently actually supporting incubators, and the central government is also funding the incubators. But to what extent are the incubators networked amongst themselves, and how can we strengthen such networks?
First of all, sir, thank you very much for having invited me for this workshop. So I think currently, as far as a network of incubators at a national level is concerned, we are probably the only association of its kind, primarily because of the small numbers. We still don't have the really large numbers in place in India. What is emerging as a very positive trend is in a few states, about 7 or 8 of them, where they have actually defined a very clear-cut policy around startups essentially. But one of the key focus areas within each of these policies has been establishing and funding incubators. And every state is trying to create its own network of incubators. And of course, we still have a dominance of the not-for-profit model of incubators, because primarily they would be government funded. But the recent 5 to 6 years, we're seeing a lot of activity happening around the for-profit incubators. So I think going forward, the trend would be to bring together the for-profit and the not-for-profit incubators under different kinds of networks, so that the best practices can be shared and not-for-profit incubators can actually graduate to the next level.
So what are the key challenges which the incubators are currently facing?
So when it comes to the not-for-profit, I think, sir, India has one of the most challenging models wherein an incubator needs to become sustainable, in effect, which means that the grant support that the government gives ceases at some particular point of time. The positive aspect of that is the incubators are encouraged to be entrepreneurial, sustaining. But at the same time, because of the fact that incubators work with a startup community, which, as you know, is itself struggling. So from a financial standpoint, there is a tremendous pressure on an incubator to sustain itself. And because there are also the other typically available revenue generation streams, such as, let us say, exit from equity or a revenue sharing arrangement, is still maturing in India. It will still take a lot more time. I think so. Sustainability is the first and major challenge. Second is to find the correct team of incubation.
You've been involved with a lot of state governments as well in creation of a startup policy. So what have been your views, and how do you see the state governments coming forward in the entire area of innovation and startups?
I think, sir, it's been a very encouraging past couple of years. We've seen almost about 8 or 9 state governments have come out with their policies. But largely, most of the government, the emphasis has been more on the internet, IT, software kind of a thing, because I think primarily that was the lowest hanging fruit. So a lot of startup policies evolved around that, and they focused largely on the student. Most of the policies had a very large focus on the student incentivization, I would call it, within the policy. But most of the other emerging sectors, be it agri, energy, electronics, manufacturing, typically have not been addressed by most of these governments, and I think only now a few have realized. And
the kind of infrastructure, I suppose, which an incubator, which is a non-IT incubator, will require would be different from a IT.
Oh yes, sir. In fact,
that requires perhaps much more
larger investment. Yes, larger investment.
And on the part of a startup also, a lot of other things to do.
Yes.
In terms of creating of infrastructure, besides the arranging of finance and commercialization of the concept itself.
So, but now we see a few states, Karnataka, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, for example, they are modifying the policies, trying to bring in these emerging sectors, and are also trying to look at key aspects such as financing, which is one of the major threat to the growth of a startup. So they are also keen on setting up funds, attracting angel investors to come to these states. And of course, unfortunately, since the fiscal incentives are typically not with the state government and more with the central government, they're also trying to address this issue with the DIPP as to how do we incentivize more private capital to come in, especially at the early stages. Because a venture with capital comes at a much later stage, but how do you incentivize private money to come in at an earlier stage?
So we hope to take this discussion forward. In today's workshop, we will be discussing the broad issues as we have touched upon just now. But in future, I think we will have to have a lot of engagement with incubators and the kind of difficulties which they are facing, and the kind of possibilities that are opening up, and how the IT and the non-IT incubators can contribute to the economy and job creation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.